The U.S. and China are in a fierce competition over production of electric vehicles. Both countries have dumped major public cash into the fight. But here in the U.S., those federal subsidies on so-called EVs are phasing out. Lisa Fletcher reports whether they should continue is driving a major debate.
In our nation's capital, there is a fast-moving debate.
You really think this car is the wave of the future?
About whether taxpayers should continue to fuel the electric vehicle industry.
I think this car and cars like it will be the wave of the future. It's not just...
John Bozzella is CEO of Global Automakers, advocating for EVs. He's driving us around in the popular Nissan Leaf.
I love the way the car drives.
What if you could drive the future today?
But the Nissan Leaf and the darling of the EV industry, Tesla, have a hot competitor in their rearview mirrors: China. In the last 4 years, China has been outpacing the U.S. in sales, last year selling more than 3 times as many vehicles. Shocking? Perhaps not. China's production is subsidized and promoted by the state.
Welcome to New Day.
44-year-old William Li and his company, NIO, are leading an aggressive push by the Chinese to sell more electric vehicles worldwide.
Clearly, they are dominating that market right now, and they intend to continue to do so. Is it in our best interest to let them yet again dominate another global industry?
Well, I think it depends on what that domination looks like.
Nick Loris of the Heritage Foundation has examined China's command of the electric vehicle market.
You know, I think we can be beneficiaries as consumers if they're making better products. That's not necessarily the worst thing. I don't think the United States is going to out-socialize or outspend the Chinese, and so we need to pick and choose where we are allocating our resources.
But to a degree, in the U.S., production is subsidized by the state too, by means of your tax dollars.
We're paying for these vehicles not just as federal taxpayers, but also in many senses as state taxpayers as well. So overall, you're talking about, several $billion in taxpayer costs.
The big government push to promote electric vehicles started in 2008 under President Bush and expanded under President Obama. Americans get a federal tax credit worth up to $7,500 to buy an EV. That's already added up to $2.2 billion tax dollars in 7 years.
Are the subsidies at all helpful? Not just propping up an industry, but actually helping it have long-term success.
I don't think it's a good long-term strategy because then you become dependent on that subsidy.
Surprisingly, some in the EV industry agree with that criticism. Jason Sowie is chairman of the Nordic Company.
Morning, what are you doing? You getting that set up?
Among their products, electric golf carts and neighborhood vehicles. Despite benefiting from the tax credit, he thinks they are bad for industry.
When a pig's at a trough feeding, they want to continue feeding. It's social engineering by the government, and I think that products should live or die on their merits and their performance and the features.
That could soon be the case in the U.S. The tax credits are starting to phase out for some electric vehicles, and President Trump's 2020 budget calls for stopping the tax credits altogether. So representatives for the electric vehicle industry, like Bozzella, are pressing for Congress to keep the money flowing.
You haven't experienced anything like this.
I'm a believer that an industry that stops is an industry that's not going to be successful in the future.
With electric vehicle sales in the U.S. and global leadership at stake, Bozzella says it's too soon to pull the plug on U.S. taxpayer support for EVs.
So despite President Trump's push to eliminate EV credits, there's actually a bipartisan move in Congress to keep them. And the whole reason behind that is that it would increase EV sales and it would support the automakers who've already invested billions of dollars in meeting new emissions standards.
Thanks a lot. Good
Sure.
story, Lisa.
Thanks.